Hello and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Leo Costello, multimedia producer here at the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
And I'm Scott Nickelbein, IT director at FFRF.
Scott, I know that you're excited about today's show because we're going to be talking to a YouTube creator that both you and I have been following for quite some time. Emma Thorne is best known for her smart and witty commentary debunking pseudoscience, Christian fundamentalism, right-wing grifters, internet cults, all while championing reason, skepticism, and a healthy dose of sarcasm. Let's play some highlights from her channel.
I assume he's doing another baptism. A baptistism. The vast majority of female dishonesty happens before, during, and after relationships. That's all time. Joshua says he's alright. Chris slaps him in the face. Oh, why? No beta, we die like Jesus.
Can a whole country have main character syndrome?
God will say to do things that look crazy. He will call you to do things that look and sound rude.
AI art man. At least he's got the right number of fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, he doesn't have the right number of fingers.
So Pokemon is a game that teaches children how to enter into the world of witchcraft, how to cast spells, how to fantasy role play.
What's wrong with fantasy roleplay?
Which story did she read you?
My very favorite one! It's about the creation of the world.
I like the part where God punishes all women with pain in childbirth forever.
Welcome to the show, Emma Thorne.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on here. First, I just wanted to start out by asking, how did you first get into making these sort of reaction videos, and what draws you to these?
Well, typically my strategy, my internet strategy has always just been to talk about whatever I'm interested in. YouTube is primarily a way for me to get the rants out of my head and not onto something else. So I don't know. I grew up with kind of sort of skeptic atheist content. It was a bit more sort of mainstream sort of stand-up stuff back in the day, I suppose. And I thought that was fun. I agree with this sort of thing. You know, I was a typical atheist kid. I read Richard Dawkins books, that sort of stuff.
Sure.
And I was like, yeah, I'm interested in this. It just kind of fell into it. It just sort of happened.
So you've just had a natural interest in religion and what people do with their religion from a young age? Yeah.
It's a really strange story because my father was a sort of staunch atheist. That was the one that kind of introduced me to all of that content, and he became a born-again Christian. And part of my interest in wanting to dive more into specifically Christianity and learn more and talk about it more was to try and sort of understand him, and you know, he wanted me to experience what he experienced. Unfortunately, it did make me more of a skeptic, if anything. Reading the Bible cover to cover, as often happens when you're a skeptical person by nature. But yeah, so it was my dad's turn from atheism to Christianity that sort of made me a more outspoken atheist in a weird way.
And what was his reaction to you reacting to content, religious content like this, like publicly?
It was a mix, because he had the level of sort of excitement, because, you know, he would watch people like Matt Dillahunty ripping apart their, you know, religious right and you know, that sort of like standard YouTube aggressive atheism that used to be the kind of mainstream thing. So he was kind of like a bit thrilled that I was sort of doing the YouTube thing on the content that he had really liked, but it definitely went downhill. Because, for context, my father, who we don't actually talk anymore, but he has some troubles and conspiracy theory leanings. And so he went very quickly into a biblical literalism sort of vibe. The Earth is 6,000 years old. Every species of spider fit on the ark, that sort of thing, which is obviously something that I quite frequently challenge. So, yeah, we had some instances. He made some fake accounts to leave me lengthy comments, that sort of thing. It was a whole...
Wow.
It was a wild ride. Yeah, my mum loves my content, though, so...
Well, that's good. What I really like about your content, Emma, is that we follow other people in the YouTube space in the skeptical and atheist community, and yours, while you are educated on the topic and provide a lot of really great explanations for how to approach these topics with reason and skepticism, your content is generally very lighthearted and you laugh a lot. There's a lot of joy that comes out of your channel. Is that something that's intentional? Do you intentionally try to make it so serious and just try to have fun, poking fun at the absurd world that is religious fundamentalism?
Yeah, for sure. It's partly my personality is now I can't really do a video without making a sort of joke and being silly and laughing. But it is also partly, I mean, occasionally I drop a more serious bombshell. If anybody watches this week's video, it is one where it's an unfortunately serious tone. But for a number of reasons, I find that can often be less entertaining. And I think part of keeping people engaged in what currently matters, what is politically relevant for people to be like up to date with, is just making it a bit more fun and lighthearted. Because if you just read the news every day, you start to lose your mind at the weight of it all. So just keeping it a bit lighthearted. Exactly. Just having something to be able to just breathe. And a lot of people say things to me like, I've been a positive part of their deconstruction. Or there's people who have been in similar situations to me where they've sort of lost, or they don't have contact with maybe people who are skeptical or LGBT plus, or they have like, a lot of religious people around them they don't feel comfortable talking to, and just having somewhere you can share similar opinions, but it's a bit more lighthearted and fun is, brings relief to some people. So I think that's really nice to do.
One video that you did recently that I think you did a great job of bringing some fun and lightheartedness into is 10 Reasons I'm Not a Christian. And I went through the response that you got for that video, and with very few exceptions, it was mostly people sharing their own experience, how they left Christianity or how they became atheists. There wasn't very much that I saw. There wasn't very many trolls pushing back. Were you surprised by that response that you got for that video?
Not too much. I partly I have higher content moderation settings than I did when I first started. And that's because for a lot of reasons, the sort of open hate speech on all social media, I think, has gotten to a certain level of extreme. And part of my kind of mission goal is to make people feel like my channel is a safe space where you can have conversations, but you can also be just generally respected. And anything that crosses a line just gets written off. So partly it's that. Partly it's the YouTube bubble of most people who watch my content watch it because they already like my content and agree with my opinions. But also something that has always been important to me is that I have always gotten comments from Christians and other religious people that like what I do, and that also find it refreshing that there's an area of sort of skeptic discussion that isn't overly mean or aggressive for the sake of it. So I wasn't too surprised. I don't get the sort of, unless you do something that gets picked up by a Kent Hovind or somebody like that, it tends to be quite positive. Nowadays it is the young men with anti-women podcast that bring the most hatred.
Yeah, there's so many podcasts where they feel like they're just enabled to say these awful things, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about these Jubilee videos of like one atheist versus 20 right-wing
you
people.
You just did a piece on the one with
Jordan Peterson.
Yes,
yeah.
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, and those videos, I'm not the first person to say this, but those videos like bring no insight to the conversation. Their only goal is to just like rage bait and platform people with like just awful opinions. Like, yeah, I'm a fascist. Isn't that great? And yeah, it's just really a scary world out there right now. You have a handful of videos where you specifically are replying to like hate comments you get, and you try to make a lot of light out of that. I'm assuming that's also part of you trying to create like a safe space, like to tell your viewers don't worry about like what people say about you. If it's not true, you know, you can laugh at it.
Exactly. And I always kind of say, if people are going to leave the sort of nasty comments or something, I'd rather they directed it at me than to anybody else in the comments. You know, I kind of want that to be safe for people, but I can take it. I'm a big, strong, manly man, and I can deal with the hate. And there's nothing funnier in the world to me than somebody getting so irate and ranting and raving, smashing on the keyboard, leaving a really, really long, angry comment, and just replying the word fart or something. There's no greater joy than just being really silly in response to hatred. So that's, kind of why I do that.
In several episodes, you've replied to stupid questions, particularly stupid questions from Quora. Now, what gave you the idea to do that, and how do you find such stupid ones?
For some reason, Quora is really right-leaning and really stupid. And what happens is you go on Quora because it's a bit like WikiHow. You just type something into Google, like, oh, how do I know if my computer has this problem? And you get somebody's asked it on Quora. And once you've clicked on a thing or two in there, it knows the algorithms know what you like. So if I've clicked on a couple of silly Christian questions, or like, atheists, what do you say to this? Now I get emails from them. So I was just getting so many emails of these stupid questions that I thought it might be fun to share those and give my best answers. You know, all the supernatural stuff, like, do I have a demon in my coffee? Just everything you can imagine under the sun. I love it so much. It's completely absurd.
Most of your reaction content, Emma, is reacting to stuff in the United States. I was curious if there's an intention there, or if that's just where this sort of brand of evangelical Christianity is. And I'm just curious what your take is, or your perspective on religious culture from your perspective, based on what you've seen.
So it's kind of a multifaceted thing, right? And anyone who is like a super nerd about it can probably look at my channel and see a slow shift towards including more UK-based stories. This week's video, for example, is talking about book bans, and it's taking examples from the US and from the UK, because as a country, we take a lot of cues from the US. So part of that is that the US has an influence on UK, politics and events. And culture, and part of it is that the US is influential on the world's culture, right? What Donald Trump does in the USA, for example, affects the whole world. And also, it's a strange contrast whenever I talk about evangelism in the USA, because it is so much more prevalent than in the UK, where we have a national religion, and the Church of England is like part of our national identity.
That seems kind of ironic when you think about it that way.
It really, it's a little bit mind-boggling. But as I say, that situation is shifting as we almost take the lead from the US. Not that it's like a US-centric problem, but that we have the same problem here of shifting to the right and shifting more religious as we do so. So it's almost, in a way, looking at evangelical updates in the US, is almost getting a heads up on things that happen in the UK. And like I say, this week the perfect example, because we're looking at something that is influenced a lot by Christian groups, which is like attempting to ban, say, LGBT books from children's school libraries and things like that.
So you're saying that like far right influencers in the UK take cues from what is happening in the US and seeing what works or what's effective, I should say.
Definitely. Yes, I mean there's always been a sort of through link there, and you know, Nigel Farage is like always popping over and saying how great you know the right-wing politicians in the US are, and I think it's less overt that our politicians and commentators are looking at the US and saying, okay, that works, let's try that, and more like the sort of overall meshing of cultures. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic to see.
And how is that culture how have you seen that culture, the religious culture, shift over time since you started reacting to content on the internet? Because you react to a lot of contemporary stuff, but also a lot of older things that people send to you. So I'm just curious if there are any like trends or anything that you've picked up on.
There's definitely a more divisive tone to everything now. I feel like that's like an exponential increase in how much more it is a almost the level of reaction is greater, whereas it used to be that something like a creationist or a religious flat earther, or you know, something like that would be really fringe, has a more sort of mainstream appeal now, which I think is the thing that generally worries me the most. And part of it, I do think, is the sort of like mediocre white guy with a podcast thing, where kind of everyone has a platform now. Not that that's in itself a bad thing. Obviously, we're all very lucky to have platforms, but yeah, there's definitely a sense that more opinions are sort of given validity now than they used to be, whereas I feel like it used to be that if you shared a certain like fringe religious opinion, everyone would kind of come together to say, wow, that's absurd, I can't believe people exist that have such a view. And now those fringe groups seem to be bigger and bigger, which is a little bit distressing.
Do you have any inkling as to why that could be? From my perspective, it seems like the rise of Donald Trump and also the COVID pandemic worked people up a lot and got people angry and enabled some really vitriolic behavior, especially like people who just never let go, who never stopped getting upset about mask mandates and stuff. It maybe caused like a snowball effect where they just, once you begin to like mistrust the government in any way, it can lead you down that path. I'm curious if you agree with that, or if you have any other takeaways.
100%. No, I completely agree. And there's a real mirror, if you looked at it politically, again, between the US and the UK. People were disenfranchised with, say, the Democratic Party, and felt that their needs weren't being heard, so they turned to Donald Trump, who sort of like waved the flag of like, we're here for the people, fight the system. That's Nigel Farage, right? The same people who were disenfranchised with the Labour Party turned to Reform UK. And it's a long-term failing, partly, of political parties. In the UK, we're particularly afraid of change. So over time, we can drift slowly to the right, and a lot of that is influenced by Christian values groups. I keep mentioning Farage. He's very much a Judeo-Christian values are the backbone of this country, and we are a Christian nation. And people who felt left behind and left out of politics before fall into the kind of traps that people like Donald Trump and Nigel Farage lead, which is, despite being, incredibly rich people who are, of a not remotely of the working class, they managed to present this idea of being like, we're for the people, and you've been betrayed. And that was, like you said, so compounded by the response to COVID, and just COVID happening in general. And And again, we see the rise of Trump, and kind of there's like we take political cues from that in some weird ways. I think part of it might also be, it's just my spurious opinion, part of it might be that the non-religious numbers of non-religious have been rising. And I think there is also a knee-jerk reaction to that, which has always interested me because, I mean, canonically, as a Christian, you should expect to be the minority. If you're waiting for the end times and you're waiting for Jesus to rise again, you should be happy with getting to be a smaller and smaller minority, because that's what's supposed to happen. But I do think people, when they start to become less of a minority or less of a majority group, they start to gain smaller numbers. That's an oxymoron. And then numbers start to dwindle. There's kind of an instinctive reaction, a fear around that, fear of losing privilege that might be sort of subconscious. And so again, political parties can lean on that. And it's a huge mix of things that I think we could probably go over for hours and hours. But
I'm sure.
in general, I very much agree with your assessment.
Emma, one of the things that's long been a mainstay on your channel is the reaction to horrible children's animations, particularly ones that attempt to indoctrinate children in Christianity. Why do you think that those particular types of videos so frequently turn out so badly?
Part of it is just that there's a lot of what we call slop out there. There's a lot of low effort content, and low effort content is a lot more prevalent for children because there's this crazy idea that children are less discerning.
And that they don't care. Like they won't notice.
Yeah, they won't care. Just stick them in front of the TV. They're not going to notice if this is bad or the story makes sense or the animation is all crazy, whatever. Which is crazy to me because, like, maybe it's a British TV thing, but like some children's TV is like the best TV in existence, and it always just upsets me on just a viewer level whenever something is really bad. But also from a kind of Christian slop perspective or a religious slop perspective, sometimes more specific, you know, the Jehovah's Witnesses have got their own children's cartoons and cringy videos for teens. It's very reliant on the message, so you don't have to do a lot. I mean, I've also looked at a number of AI generated religious channels for children, and all you really have to do to get, like, even Dove approved, if you look at Dove's a huge organization, to get Dove approved, all you need to do is have the word Jesus in your movie somewhere, and you can make it can be the worst thing you've ever seen. It can be inaccurate even to a Bible canon, but if it's got Jesus and some sort of like faux moral lesson based on the Bible, then that's good enough to, you know, make 100 DVD copies and hand them out at preschools or whatever. They're just, the bar is so low.
On that topic, one question that I've been dying to ask you is, in your professional opinion as a VFX editor, which is more cursed, the Booples or Donkey Ollie?
We have a graphic for viewers that I put together so you can see what we're talking about. We can, yeah.
Oh, perfect. So my instinct is to say Donkey Ollie, which I think is probably what you expected. There's for a couple of reasons. First of all, Booples, you can tell, is Bear actually contacted me, by the way. Bear, who made Booples, sent me an email that I really must reply to, being like, thanks for looking at a couple of my different things. Here are some answers to your questions about it. You can tell that was made by one person who just like wanted to do it because they had kids and they wanted to make something that was a fun cartoon for kids, right? And there's a couple of things like that the Lion movie was like so ridiculous, but you can tell that one person made it because they really wanted to make it and it took them like a full year. Whereas something like Donkey Ollie looks like it was rushed through a cheap studio.
Or it looks like
animators
hey,
were
I have a
paid the bare
cousin
minimum.
It also kind of looks like, hey, I have a cousin who took a semester in After Effects, and he could probably do this show for us. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's so weird. I mean, it's weird with Donkey Ollie because some of the songs are really high quality.
Yeah.
And a couple of them are quite good, fun songs. But then the animation, the storytelling, the voice acting, the choices with the voices are very peculiar. And it all just looks... This is my least favorite thing with anything, right? It's, there's a company that makes loads of these movies. I did a review of one called Finding Jesus, which is a play on Finding Nemo, but they just tell stories about Jesus, they're fish. And you can tell when something is just so lazily made, and it's that slop thing again, where it's just like moral about Jesus, and then just reuse these animation loops over and over again. So yeah, the other worst thing about Donkey Ollie that makes it probably worse than anything else is the number of extreme close-ups of like just like the donkey's like up here. And nobody needs to see that.
They're saving on background animation, I suppose. You know, I'm just realizing kind of the irony of this is that you're saying, Emma, that a lot of this seems like the content, the quality of the content doesn't really matter because kids don't pay attention. But it's really the parents who aren't paying attention. It's just the parents see the word Jesus on the title, like you said, and that's all they need to buy it. So you don't need to invest in quality animation. Just am I going to get my kid finding Dory where I don't know what the lesson is going to be, or am I going to get my kid finding Jesus where I know that's going to be something I'm going to approve of? It's
yeah,
like,
and
it's
then
like
you end up with the one that's got the racist crab in it instead.
Yeah, always Asylum Pictures. They're the ones that like will make like Transmorphers after Transformers came out. It's like that.
Yes.
It's like that,
Oh,
but for
gosh.
Christians.
Yeah. Tomb Hunter. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's exactly that. They've done a couple of Christian movies, I think, as well, Asylum.
Yeah. Oh, have they? I didn't realize that. I know like the
think
Creation
so.
Museum did Night at the Creation Museum. Did you react to that
Yes.
one? I forgot
that
if you
was,
did.
Yeah, I did. That was
Okay.
Eric Hovind.
I'm curious, Emma, from the reactions you've seen to your content and everything. What are some misconceptions you think people still have today about being an atheist or a skeptic?
Well, we mentioned Jordan Peterson when we were talking earlier, and I think his Jubilee thing kind of illustrated a lot of what the misconceptions around atheism are. Mainly that atheism is this one homogenous ideology, that it's not being atheist, it's having a specific view of the world and everything that is not hard science. And sometimes there's a misconception of having sort of the religion of science, if you want to be like an internet evangelist about it. There's definitely... when I try and explain it to people, I try and explain atheism and agnosticism and, sort of like describe it in terms of, how, say, Christians, because mostly Christians that this conversation happens with, feel about other religions that they don't believe in. Your attitude towards Hinduism is my attitude towards all of those religions, But there's quite a lot. Something that I've heard a few times in my sort of, I guess, nicer, more generic content is things like, you look like a Christian, or you sound like you could be Christian. And that's a weird sort of idea that a lot of people have this view that to be a kind of nice and compassionate person is to be religious. And there is this view of atheism as sort of, the other side of that as not nice, confrontational. I think maybe the fact that a lot of traditional sort of online and YouTube atheism has been a bit, overly masculine, maybe, has been sort of that deliberately confrontational in the way that just that's what gets more clicks in the media.
Yeah, I think
but
especially
that's definitely
early
shifting
on.
now.
Yeah, I think especially early on during people's deconstruction, people are kind of angry that they were raised thinking something that they no longer believe is true. and they can get that frustration out by watching things like the Atheist Experience, which I think there is a great place for it, and I think the Atheist Experience helped me out a lot when I was on that journey. But once you're kind of past that, that it becomes a lot more important just to try to be kind towards others, you know?
Yeah, I think the main mistake that people make when they're thinking of atheism is to see either the more confrontational content, which again does absolutely have its place. I mean, some topics aren't a debate or a discussion. Some topics are, this is the facts and you need to listen to me. And there are people that do that really well. And then some of it is the more like, the gentler, more like, collaborative, kinder approach. And the mistake is viewing atheism as one of those, usually the former. Whereas clearly we're demonstrating that atheists are just people who share one view on religion in common, but otherwise we're just people across the spectrum of people like any other, group.
You've covered on your show just a wide range of topics, everything from creationism, flat earthers, spiritual grifters,
Sasquatch hunters,
and and multi-level marketers. I mean, let's throw them all in. So what type of content really gets under your skin the most?
I think that the thread, because my channel does look very eclectic for an outsider, to me, the thread linking everything is there, because I'm just a skeptic in general, and I have this sort of consumer protection focus almost. Anything that takes advantage of people is what really gets under my skin. So that extends to like religious scam.
Do you mean like specifically like maliciously, like they know what they're doing?
Yes, although sometimes there are cases where you can't tell or people feign ignorance, but it is quite obviously taking advantage of people, and that's what I reject. Anything that is like, I have been challenged and debunked and proven wrong on this thing 100 times, but I'm going to ignore that. Please send me your money. That gets under my skin.
Or just the prosperity gospel in general. Send me money.
Yes.
And God will bring you good
send me
things.
money. Anyone who just doesn't appear to know anything about the Bible and is using the Bible to try and either create some sort of reaction, or use some group of people as a scapegoat, just to get clicks and make money on the internet. I think it's disgusting.
Have you ever seen the show Righteous Gemstones, Emma? I bet you would love that show if you don't watch it already.
No, I haven't.
Oh, you would. Do you know about that show? It's an HBO show, Danny McBride show, and it's about a family that owns a mega church, and it's not really. It's not as as much of a satire on that kind of religious world as you might hope, but it's still got a lot of really fun observations about it in the show. It's pretty good.
Oh, cool.
So you mentioned.
I'll check it out.
You mentioned people who continue to push theories that have already been debunked. And of course, that leads me directly to Kent Hovind. You had quite a long-going feud with him a couple of years ago. But recently, end of last year, beginning of this year, you wound up on Whack an Atheist again. How did that happen?
Well, I think part of this I enjoy, because I think what it is I intimidate or somehow threaten Kent Hovind, which I just take great pleasure out of, because I am a tiny sensitive lady. And I think that's why it kind of became a thing in the first place originally, was I was sort of couldn't believe that I was having such an effect that this much older evangelical preacher in the US was I don't know, really talking about it. I didn't realize at the time that was kind of how he makes his, how he gets his views on his videos, is a lot of hate views and using the names of sort of known skeptics. But yeah, I don't know exactly what it is. I I was a bit disappointed just because his channel had been like shut down a couple of times before he came back, and I found out he was still doing Whack and Atheist, and I was like, oh no, come on. But he has since gone again. I had a lot of people asking if I was going to talk about something new, and there were people like Atheist Junior that covered streams he did like based on my videos a while back that I didn't comment on, and it was just I just sort of got to the point where there was genuinely nothing new to say because he didn't say anything new, and I don't think he has said anything new for the last 40 years, and I couldn't really respond to his content like generally because there was nothing new to say.
Well,
because I'd already answered that point and that point and that point in the previous videos. So
looking at everything you've reacted to on your channel, Emma, I'm curious, what do you view in the range of most harmful to least harmful? What do you see on the extreme sides of that spectrum?
It's a difficult question because some of the worst content, the stuff that sticks in my mind is especially a lot of the Jehovah's Witness videos that I've come up with a new term. They can have that. Jehovah's Witnesses, you can have that for free. Stuff that is specifically targeted at kids, because when you actually sit down and watch what they're telling young people, especially the stuff that's aimed at sort of teenagers, which is things like they had a video that I reacted to that was specifically like, this guy was really into music and he loved playing his guitar, but he shouldn't do things he loves. He should spend his life being a missionary because the next life is more important. And stuff like that just upsets me so much.
Yeah, same.
And is just such a horrible message, but it is also a more fringe, it's Jehovah's Witness content made by Jehovah's Witnesses for Jehovah's Witnesses. So overall harm-wise, the more generic sort of Jordan Peterson, and then, people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, even though Ben Shapiro is a weird one because he's Jewish, but he frames a lot of his views for the Christian right in the US, which I find quite a strange situation. They have much more mass appeal, and their ideas, a lot of them, when you boil them down, are not only intellectually dishonest and silly, but a lot of them are incredibly harmful as well. And that is like there's this crossover with sort of like masculinity, red pill kind of content that is targeting specifically young men, that I think is quite dangerous in how wide that appeal is. Those are the two kind of areas probably.
So I think it sounds like you're saying that you could have really extremely harmful views, but if it's not reaching mainstream, it's not really as impactful. But if you have a mainstream audience, you can affect more change, then you are more harmful, even if your views aren't as extreme.
Yes, and a lot of the time, there's a lot of channels, people like Matt Walsh or a more gentle sort of seeming channel like A Girl Defined or something like that. A lot of these are kind of gateways to extreme views in that they have a sort of general overview. They have this they present a common sense mentality that appeals to a wider audience, that draws people into what can then become actually quite extreme views. And that's super, super harmful because that's targeting your average person who, again, is disenfranchised with something politically or something, and taking them slowly towards a more extreme view. Yeah,
it's a crazy world out there right now. But I'm glad you're commenting on all this stuff and trying to make light of it all and trying to make people laugh along the way. We do have a couple audience questions for you, Emma. First is, do you ever get credible safety threats due to the content you make?
The one I've ever had was somebody obviously looked me up in sort of public directory. This was mostly no, because most of my audience is in the USA. So that is partly a positive of that, is that most people are several thousand miles away from me. But I had a couple that I had apparently had some sort of online interaction with that must have looked up my information and found my registered business address, which is my accountant's office. And they showed up at my accountant's office looking for me, which distressed my accountants and caused a bit of a fracas. But other than that, it's been relatively safe. There was a little while when I was still working in VFX. I had some of the red pill internet forum guys were like, yeah, let's ruin this person's life. I guess she works here, and here's all the information we can find. And they never did anything with it. I think a lot of the internet is more instinctive reaction, angry comment, and then it's gone. It's only it's mostly creators, or if you want to call them that, people like Kent Hovind, that I sort of seem to live in their mind rent-free. Most people are relatively normal, but I also am now really careful with my online safety, which I just recommend for everybody.
Absolutely. Is there a Christian nationalist movement in the UK? And is it comparable to what's happening right now in the United States? And that kind of ties in to something you said earlier, which is that what you see in the US is a preview of what comes to the UK. And with everything that's been going on in the US right now with Project 2025 and trying to get rid of the Johnson Amendment and all this, what are you seeing?
So it's a little more, I guess, a little more subtle. The main thing that I'm constantly aware of recently in the United Kingdom is there are a few big Christian advocacy groups in the UK. Christian Concern is the biggest one, and then they have a legal arm called the Christian Legal Centre. And there's a lot of news wherein somebody is taking some employer to court because they let trans people in the bathroom, or they were wrongly, unfairly dismissed for spouting hate speech online or something like that. And invariably it turns out that they are funded by and advocated for by the Christian Legal Centre and other groups as well a lot of the time. And then there's the more subtle Christian values aspect of just politics in general and certain groups. But pretty much all of the sort of right-leaning Christian newsletters and magazines and newspapers have been saying Reform UK is the party for a good Christian to vote for. I think most of our Conservative Party leaders in recent memory have espoused the Christian values of this nation and that we are a Christian nation. And same thing as I said earlier about Nigel Farage with his Judeo-Christian values at the heart of everything here, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's a slightly more subtle move. And again, things like Kent Council banning LGBT plus books from the children's sections in libraries. That's a move backed by and demanded by Christian parents and Christian advocacy groups. But that's never the headline. Whereas I think in the I think that's because we're a bit more secular in general here, which again feels sort of backwards considering. But it's, in the US it feels like it's more normal to be openly in defense of Christian values and protecting this country for Christian reasons, whereas here that's sort of a subheading. And it almost feels like we don't want to be too overt about the fact that this is based on our religious thought.
Yeah, us Americans aren't very good at subtlety in general. What do you hope people get away from your channel when they watch your stuff? How much of it is intended to be educational and how much of it is intended to be entertainment? What do you hope people get from what you do?
So the main purpose, and I always say this, and I always put my videos in the entertainment category, the main purpose is entertainment. The overall theme is you might learn something, but you'll have fun doing it. And using that, I can then slyly do the occasional serious video, do the occasional fundraiser, and sort of bring people in without them knowing to slightly more serious topics and raise awareness for things that I think matter. And that way, my channel isn't an overwhelming experience. It's not like, oh, there's a new Emma Thorne video, something terrible must have happened in the news. It's more like, oh, hopefully this will be something funny, and sometimes it's not. But hopefully, because people are overall having a good time, they're more willing to listen and learn things that I think are really important. And the people who watch my channel are super, super generous with giving to good causes as well. So it's kind of like an entertainment first, and again, a safe space for anyone who feels. I mean, I get a lot of comments. I released some Pride merch, and I'll get comments that's like, I could never wear this in my hometown, but I'm glad that you're here. It's primarily that, a safe and fun space. And then we can come together from time to time and do something that maybe is a little bit more serious and a little bit more important. But overall, we're here to be silly little guys. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I think you succeeded at that. You make me laugh at things I'm usually at things that usually make me angry. So that's a good thing to have.
Oh, good. That's exactly what I want.
Well, thank you, Emma, for coming on our show this week. Can you tell our viewers where they can follow your work?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me. You can find me at youtube.com/Emma Thorne videos, or at Emma Thorne videos, I believe is the YouTube functionality now.
All right, great, Emma. Thank you very much. And check out Righteous Gemstones. I really think you'll like it. That wraps up this week's episode of FFRF's Ask an Atheist. You can check out our radio show, ffrf.org/radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Annie, Lori, and Dan are off in Tennessee this week, so I will actually be co-hosting with one of our attorneys.
And be sure to watch our latest episode of We Dissent, the only podcast hosted exclusively by women constitutional lawyers discussing church-state separation. Listen and subscribe to We Dissent wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out online at we-dissent-.org.
Finally, if you want more information about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, check out our website at ffrf.org. If you're a member already, thank you very much. If not, consider joining us. We'll see you next time on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.